Yes, we had been very lucky that Muzharul Islam, when he completed his graduation from Oregon University in USA, he came in the year 1953, and in the same year he designed two buildings. One is the Art College, the then Art College, and the other one is the library. And these two buildings actually established the beginning of modern era in architecture in our country. And these two buildings are actually very nice buildings, very good buildings, very efficient and very pleasant, and also represent the honest expression of modernism. Muzharul Islam actually adopted the Western ideals, Western principles for his design, but he was an excellent architect, so he knew, and he was creative. He knew how to adopt those things in our context, how to modify those things into our context of culture, context of climate, context of material. So these two buildings, actually not only the first two buildings in Bangladesh, these two buildings can also be understood as the first two modern buildings in the whole of our subcontinent. Because Kanvinde, Charles Correa, Doshi, they didn't produce anything in the early 50s. And not in, Jeffrey Bawa was not there at that time. So these two buildings represent the modernity of our whole subcontinent. And that's why I said we were very lucky, and we are lucky, because he was able to demonstrate with two excellent examples how the new building should be. He didn't take any inspiration from our local Mughal architecture or from colonial architecture. He wanted to create a new era, because after 1947 the country was divided and it got independence from the British colonialism. So we had the inspiration and the enthusiasm to build the country, to bring some pride within ourselves. And Muzharul Islam was able to do that very nicely, very efficiently. And his architecture at that time was almost contemporary with the rest of the world, because in 1950s, early 50s, the international style was quite important, but he didn't go for the international style. He was probably influenced by Corbusier more, and in the Art College he exhibited how the openness of the land, in the ground floor everything is open, which is devised from Corbusier, but his plan form is very different. It is very local, open, all direction, and bringing the nature underneath, and also very transparent. The demarcation between the open and the interior and the outdoor was totally destroyed. There is no outdoor-indoor demarcation. So this is how he wanted to create a new architecture for Bangladeshi context, and which has also some similarities with the rural architecture, where indoor and outdoor is not that strongly expressed. So this is one thing. And then he used local material. He went for creating bricks. In Art College he used the bricks. This is the first time exposed brick walls were used in our country, and which later we saw that Louis Kahn also used the same brick walls. He made the whole buildings here in brick buildings, brick walls, except the assembly building, which is made of concrete RCC walls. So Khan actually used the architecture of the walls in Bangladesh. He was inspired by the Roman architecture basically, but he was a modern architect. So he wanted his buildings to have certain personality, gravity, and also some contextually Indian or to our subcontinent. He saw Taj Mahal, and he understood that this country has a big tradition, a big legacy of architecture in the past. So he understood that he will have to come up with a really strong architecture, because we deserve to have a good building here. And since we have got the democracy after the 47 independence from British, so it was necessary that for Louis Kahn it was necessary to establish democratic institutions. So assembly building provided us the democracy, the symbolic democracy in our country. So, which will inspire us to have the courage and the tenacity to build an egalitarian society.
Muzharul Islam is always going to keep on coming back in discussion of architecture from time to time, and for many different reasons. And I think we will be rediscovering Muzharul Islam in every era as time passes by. Why he is so important, I think, is because he was the person who laid down what Bengali modernity was going to be. In a couple of strokes, which means in the very few first works, he was able to lay down what we can say the foundation stone of Bengali modern architecture. Now, or a Bangladeshi modern architecture. But does modern architecture need to be Bangladeshi or Bengali, or at that time East Pakistani, whatever? I think what is important to understand is that he basically showed very early on through his work what people later on explained as Kenneth Frampton explained as critical regionalism, or Sarah Goldhagen came back and explained it as situated modernism. But Muzharul Islam, instead of writing about it or talking about it in his very early works, he showed that how a very pure modern architecture can take place, which will be extremely sensitive to place, people, context, socioeconomic condition, and will still resonate with the heritage and the life of the people of that place. As a person and as an architect, he is invaluable. He is who he is. He is our greatest architect, our greatest master, and his work is absolutely seminal. I mean, work like that is there for us to observe, for us to see, for us to grow on, for us to be inspired by. It is Islam's house is not important, or Islam's art college is not important just on its own as a work, but what it does for many generations of architects to come is what makes his work so vital. For him, modernity is not about a style. Modernity is not about a particular way of architecture. Modernism for him is a set of ethics. And as we know that he was a part of the Communist Party of Bangladesh, and he was a socialist by heart. He was always inclined to the left, and all this is an ethical standpoint. And I think when he looked at modernity, he looked at modernity as a set of ethics, a way of life and a way of work that enables us to create a society which is more equal, or is able to distribute among society wealth and rights and what we would consider absolute necessities of living. So his work was like that. His work was telling us of how to be more democratic, how to create a work which is democratic, how to create work which is aligned with a particular socio-economic situation. And this is where his ethical role of his architecture comes in. The other part of his ethical role, I would say, is that his leadership quality. This is something that one should not forget, that who were his friends, who did he hang out with, where, this tea gathering was, people like Kamrul Hassan, Shamsur Rahman, Kalim Sharafi, Jainal Abidin. These are the people who used to have tea with. These are the people who went on, including him, to lead Bangladesh in every field, in the field of arts, literature, architecture, music. So he was rubbing shoulders, or I say having tea with a group that strongly believed in that it was on their shoulders to lead our country, to show the way forward. And they had this tremendous patriotic attitude towards the country also to take on this responsibility. And they had the ability. They knew that they had the ability to do that. And from there is where I think the sense of ethics is more stronger. If somebody doesn't take the role of leadership on his shoulders, then the question of ethics is not so important. You can do whatever you like. But when you try to do your work as example, or what you say is going to be the way forward for generations to come, then a person is always very conscious about the ethical standpoint of what he's saying and what he's doing. And I'm actually quite happy that you bring this question up of ethics, because that is extremely core element of his thought process. I often say that Muzharul Islam doesn't have architectural philosophy. He has a philosophy of life.